Hello, welcome to the G.I. Joe New News Review. I am David Allen. The following content was originally intended for the G.I. Joe fan club, but due to unforeseen circumstances, this content will no longer be used in that venue. And so I wanted to share them with you here. I hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome to another episode of the G.I. Joe Fan Club Live. This is the G.I. Joe fans' opportunity to see the entire breadth of the brand of G.I. Joe from the inception to present, toys, animation, comics, and sometimes we even like to talk about our cousins, Action Force. This episode is about them, and I have my special guest, Paddy Lennon, the author of Total Action Force, The Battle Years, and Volume 2, Total Action Force, Volume 2. And he just got the Kickstarter for the soft cover got approved, and they're putting that out, and he's also working on the Robo Skull Mark II book. So, Paddy Lennon, thank you for joining us today on our Action Force episode. And I also have Hawk Sanders, who is the publisher of Rising Sun Comics. Thank you both for joining me today. And I'm David Allen, if I forgot to mention myself.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, David. I'm glad to be a part of this.
Yeah, thanks for having us, David. Always a pleasure to jump on.
Thank you very much. So there's been, like I was talking, the Robo Skull Mark II, kind of a resurgence since the Robo Skull Mark II. I don't have a picture of it. I should have prepared better. But since then, Hasbro and a lot of the companies have been doing a lot more Action Force, Paletoy related products. First was the Tiger Force Outback. I don't know if you get a good picture of that or not, from Hasbro Classified series. And then we had, and I totally forgot about the Action Force through the Valaverse. I don't know if you can see that or not. What am I doing? That's my Sergeant Slaughter Action Force from Valaverse. They got the license for Action Force. Also, Super 7 did Red Laser. So the popularity has really risen recently. What do you guys think is the reason for that? Paddy, you go first.
I think Hasbro have certainly Super 7. I get the feeling that they're all very much fans of G.I. Joe and fans of the obscure stuff in G.I. Joe. I think you've seen with the Super 7 figures, they've had a real Sunbow focus, taking characters from episodes that maybe you haven't seen before made into figures. Right. So they have that kind of knowledge of G.I. Joe and of kind of the obscure end of G.I. Joe. So I think that's part of the reason why certainly Super 7 have gone for Red Laser. And of course, it's an easy way for them to repaint their Cobra Commander figure, get some use out of that tooling budget. But they've also indicated that they're going to go deeper on the international G.I. Joes this year with their reaction lines. So, we could probably expect to see some more Action Force. I just think there's a rich seam of stuff to mine, I think, for collectors, not just obviously UK collectors will eat this stuff up, but I think there's always been an American interest in the repainted G.I. Joe characters that came out from Action Force. So characters like Red Laser, characters like Red Vulture, Quarrel, and Gaucho. Those figures have always sold well to American collectors because obviously they're repaints of toys you guys had. And that's carried over to the vehicles that Paletoy repainted as well. So I think the Hasbro and Super 7 are seeing that stuff, and they're seeing that there is an interest. They do pay attention to Facebook groups, they do pay attention to forums. So when they see people talking about this stuff, they do notice it. And I think that's kind of led to them seeing those opportunities to offer repaints of their existing product in Action Force color schemes.
So you think that's the reason the popularity of those is because the fans are really chomping at the bit for different foreign things like that?
Yeah, I think there definitely has been a big growth in the interest from the fandom in the foreign repaints, and not just Paletoy, but also things like the Argent 7. Those become very highly sought after figures in the US as well. The
Brazilian stuff.
Yeah, I think, for a long time, the fans didn't notice that stuff existed. And thanks to the birth of the internet, now they know.
Right.
And it's become, those have become popular things for people to try hunt down and collect.
The world has become a smaller place, right? Technically.
Yeah, I mean, and 10 years ago, before the advent of eBay and cheap international shipping, where would you even get some of this stuff? So I think that's part of it as well, as you've seen people get used to buying from sellers overseas, or just traveling more to conventions. I mean, traveling to a convention overseas was not something people did 15, 20 years ago, but it is something people are doing now. We see even. I've traveled over to conventions in the States, but we've also seen American collectors come over to events here, like Roll Call. And I think that sort of feedback has, as people go to these events or have friends who go to these events, the knowledge kind of gets passed around.
Cool. The community is as a whole is getting more knowledgeable and getting bigger and kind of sharing and becoming more of a larger community. I agree with that. What is your thoughts on that, Hawk? What do you think the reason for the resurgence of Action Force and a lot of this stuff?
Well, I wanted to, I'll let me deviate just a smidge, because then I think I can explain what my theories are on it a little bit better. I think that there's a community in the UK and in Europe that really are centrally focused on Action Force as it was its core, Paletoy Action Force, and that is so different to G.I. Joe. It's very, very different. And whenever G.I. Joe becomes a part of the line, it almost takes on a different life of itself. It begins to change. So there's a very strong group that is their Action Force, and that they're, as it began to evolve and G.I. Joe and, got more integrated into the line, I think it become less as interesting. I say that because if you really look at them, they're wildly different to a G.I. Joe figure. A G.I. Joe figure has battle armor grip. It has more points of articulation, and some of even the designs are a little more flamboyant. Where I believe that Action Force stayed a little more true to their character MOS, or the modus operandi. So I think what's happened along the way is that we've slowly kind of integrated into this idea, where the internet is bigger, of course, but when we grew up with it here in the States, we really didn't have a way to look back and say that there was these other things. But you had some select group of people that actually got to travel to the UK. They would find it over there. What is this? Get integrated into the line, and slowly it began to trickle back. And I do think that the club had a real hand in integrating some of this stuff into better well known for us as American collectors. Now you pair Cobra against the Red Shadows, and they're two wildly different concepts. And I see the Red Shadows as being much more ruthless and almost violent to a point, in my opinion, as compared to Cobra can be sometimes laughable in the way that they're approached. And I know there's a transition period between the two. So
depends on the interpretation of Cobra as well. If you go with animation, definitely. Comics, it's in the middle. The toys are a lot more ruthless in the file cards and the biographies and stuff. They're definitely more ruthless in the toy line itself. So you're right.
I'd also just
Go ahead,
sorry to put across you, Hawk. I'd also say that part of that, rootlessness of the Red Shadows comes from the comic that they were featured in, because obviously Battle, the comic that the Action Force stories were told in, was a pre-existing war comic, and there's a long history of war comics in the UK since the late '60s. And they were quite brutal. In say the Real American Hero Larry Hama run, it was very rare that GI Joe characters died. You obviously had the Saw Viper take out a few guys at one point, but for most of the run, no Joes really died, and none of them were really in danger. Whereas in Battle Action Force, there's Z Force characters getting off left, right, and center. There's Red Shadows getting mowed down by the dozen, because the comics here were a little bit more bloodthirsty. So they could tell those kind of stories, where the violence is almost baked into Action Force because of the comics. It was a backstrip in, so they were used to mass murder in a way that I don't think American comics were at the time, and I think that's partly where that harder edge to the Red Shadows maybe comes into play. It's because they were able to do kind of more hard edged comics.
And I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. The Baron was such a ruthless guy that sometimes he even mowed down his own men. It was, he was very brutal. I think as time evolved, and now that we've gotten older and the internet has gotten more involved with it too, a lot of us have full or near complete collections too, and this allows us to look to further beyond our collections of figures, and obviously when we look at Argent 7, or we look at Commandos and Marco, we look at the Paletoy years of Action Force, and even Action Force up to the point that it becomes GI Joe International Heroes, and I guess I'm going to let Paddy explain that a little more because he lived through it. I think he can tell a better story than I can. But I think that's how it's happened. I think the club had a little bit of a pool because we've had guys like Dave Tree, Jim Marshall, we've had Chris, and all of them were involved. Paddy, yourself, I know that we had met probably once before at a show, and you had come over, I think, to a couple of shows here in the States, and so there's been this cross-pollination that's been going on. So I think it makes for a much fuller table to eat from.
I know for my experience, I knew the Action Force existed in the 80s, but I was fully in bed with G.I. Joe, but I was getting the comics. That was my big thing. Yeah, I watched the cartoon and I was getting all the toys, but I was a big comic book guy. And so when Marvel started to do European missions, they were basically reprinting Action Force, G.I. Joe Action Force. I guess it's was at that international
Action Force Monthly is what they were republishing. Yeah.
And that's what they were reprinting, and they only did like 16 issues or whatever. So I was aware of Action Force, but I didn't know that much about it. I knew it was the British version of G.I. Joe, and it was a different interpretation of G.I. Joe, and some of the G.I. Joes were changed and some of them were not changed, and things like that. But it wasn't until, I would say, 2010 when I came back into the G.I. Joe community, and I went to the first JoeCon. My first JoeCon in 2010 was here in Orlando, Florida, and I saw all this Action Force. I'm like, whoa, what is all this stuff? What is the Roboskull? What? And then I started talking to people like yourself, Paddy, and Brian, and Chris, and Ben Conway, and and Hawk. I only met Hawk a little while ago, but he's become my best friend when it comes to Action Force because I keep bending his ear. But that it kind of broadened my imagination and stuff like that. And it kind of got me to this point where I want to know more about this stuff. I want to see what this was about. And I don't know if I'll ever get completely everything there is for Action Force, because it was a large series. It's actually quite larger than the original 82 to 94 G.I. Joe, if you really add it all up. Because it was in the mid 70s, I think, that it came out, 76, if I'm not correct, Paddy.
No, 82 is the first Action Force series.
Even the 5 POA ones?
It's 5 POAs, yeah, started in 82.
Oh, okay.
And 5 POA mixed in with some Hasbro repaints carried on until 85. And then it transitioned fully over to the G.I. Joe stuff, which we called Action Force International Heroes, from 87 to 89. So there was kind of 2-3 year periods where Action Force was on the market from different companies.
Maybe I'm thinking of the comic. Was the comic started in the 70s?
No, the comic would have been 82 as well. Although again, it was backup strip in a pre-existing comic. So Battle comic had started in the 70s, but it wasn't Battle Action Force until 1982. And kept being printed as Battle Action Force until 1986. And then Marvel UK took over with Action Force Weekly and then monthly for 87, 88. So, but there's about a 6 year period there where there's, out of the entire 1980s, there's a 6 year period where you have Action Force product on the shelves. But there actually was quite a lot of it. I mean, the first series had 18 figures. The second series had over 50, and then from then on, when the Hasbro product kept coming over, we got essentially the same Hasbro product that you guys were getting, but we were getting it a year or two later. So it is actually quite a sizable toy line. Not quite as sizable as a Real American Hero was, but certainly it would represent a decent fraction of the number of figures that a Real American Hero got. So it actually is quite an expansive line. Even the Paletoy stuff, you're probably talking well in excess of 60 figures for those series. And of course, some of them are extremely rare. You will pay, it's $300 or $400 for a single figure for some of that Paletoy stuff, because of its rarity. And that's before you get into vehicles, which again, because of their rarity, can get up to the stratospheric heights, depending on what you're looking for.
I think I could talk a little bit about what came previous, a little more. And what came previous is Paletoy was actually part of General Mills, but Paletoy was run by Alfred Pallet up in Colville. Is that correct, Paddy?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So Alfred Pallet, he had a contract with Hasbro to be able to use their molds. So they actually had Action Man. And Action Man came over in 1967, is when Action Man, I believe, was released, its first release in the UK. Action Man was such a huge popular item within, especially within Britain. I'm not for certain how it did, because I know there's a lot of other lines across Europe that differ. Joe Group in France, and there's a couple others that are very different from that. But it was such a huge hit that they actually made exclusive product just for Action Man, which was, I think the first were the footballer. I know there was a couple others, and I'm not
a lot of the ceremonial outfits for famous British regiments as well.
Yes.
So that was they were one of their bigger sellers as well, what they call a ceremonials line. So, things like the Horse Guards and groups like that in the British Army. And they would put out special uniforms for those, and those were huge sellers. And then later on, towards the end of the 70s, their biggest seller was actually the SAS figures in Action Man, which were downsized for the SAS figures for Action Force. They were unique items, unique outfits for Action Man that were very, very big sellers in the Action Man line.
And I think that's one of the key points in it is that in the UK, that this ran for much longer than it did. The main line ran for longer than it did in the US. So by 1976, G.I. Joe was pretty much done at that point, and it switched over to Super Joe in 77 and 78. They were already developing to cut costs. So you really only had about 5 or 6 years where GI Joe was running, where in the UK it ran for much longer before they finally shut down the main Action Man line. And in that, they did have comics regarding the 12-inch figures that I believe were released through a Fleetway. I believe it is Fleetway. Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, where they were focused on the 12-inch GI Joe, and it did have some SAS stories in it, as well as I think it had like I think it had like the Doughboy, a couple Doughboy stories and things like that in it. So they had a few annuals that they had released before they had actually come back to the battle weeklies. And that's something else I want to point out. Us here in the U.S., we really didn't have weekly comics. They had weekly comics inside the U.K. So when we're talking about Battle came out weekly. Battle Action came out weekly, and Battle Action Force came out weekly. So it's a lot of stories coming at you all at once, you know. But
That's cool. I didn't know that. I knew that there was something. I wasn't really sure exactly, but I thought it was prior in the 70s. But thank you, Hawk, for that. So the comics that have been coming out recently, the club touched on a little bit of Action Force over the years, and a couple of little pieces here and there, but they made it more international. They had Brazilian stuff. They had all the different factions that you never saw in the Larry Hama. You never saw any of that stuff in, maybe a smidge in Devil's Due with the Red Shadows, but it was a different Red Shadows. But Rising Sun Publishing has gotten the license for Action Force and all this cool stuff, and they've been publishing like continuations of the original Action Force comics in these oversized, I don't know if I can get a good picture of that, comics. I have the first 2 issues of it here. I don't know, can't get very good lighting on this. Oh, that's a better picture there. And they just funded their Kickstarter, I think in November, for issue 4. And the prior to that, they funded the Kickstarter for the it's like a reprint kind of graphic novel with a bunch of the old material and stuff combined with a bunch of extras and stuff like that. And both of those Kickstarters are going to be coming out sometime this year, if I'm not mistaken, right, Hawk?
yes, yeah. So that series, we really wanted to do a callback to the original battle comics, Battle Action Force comics, and we wanted to dovetail into it the best that we could. Jim Marshall had written the series, and he's the writer on it, and we come up with a way to kind of plug things in and dovetail off of that. So we've just finished our 4th Kickstarter. The book is pretty much done at this point. We've got to get some numbers in before we go to print, but I'm really pleased with it, that we've had a lot of big talent that have jumped on the book. And
yeah, Robert Atkins and his brother Brian have been doing the covers, and they've been pitching it here in the U.S. And those guys are as big as you can get in the G.I. Joe community. For IDW, they work with Chuck Dixon for years and years, and they're working on the G.I. Joe Renegade Game Studio stuff. They're huge guys to have working on that with you.
And on the other side, it's Jeff Senior and Kevin Hopgood, which in the UK, they are big. They're big players in the realm. They worked on the original Action Force stuff. So it's all kind of big name players in the game, you know, that's working on that. Now you wonder about that size. That size is actually the size that the original weeklies would have been.
Oh, so the original books from the 80s were that size?
Yes, they were. Yeah.
Oversized. Oh, cool. I like oversized comics. I don't know this. I have a fascination with oversized comics. I got a bunch of them, and it's just weird. I like weird, different size stuff.
that, and I think that's like a A4 format. I think is probably what it goes to. But and this is kind of part of the resurgence, I think, of Action Force and Action Force in our world, which covers many different things. Paddy's book, both of them, which showcase, and they were such a runaway Kickstarter. It did so well. And I did get in on that last Kickstarter, by the way, Paddy. So I'm excited to
Thank you for that.
So I think that this shows that there's a resurgence of Action Force and all of that stuff that's coming at us. We've got the new Robo Skull from Skeletron Toys with Ben Conway. It's a very beautiful piece that I'm hoping arrives any day now. I'm waiting for the doorbell to ring. But
unfortunately, I have some bad news on that one. It's going to be a couple months late, but I don't think that's a bad thing because they're making sure that they do not skimp on the quality and the every detail they can possibly make sure that they get into it. They're going to make sure they get into it. So I talked to Ben Conway about the Robo Skull the other day, and he is committed to making sure that the highest quality is met, that they keep everything that the fans and the supporters helped get to, and they're going to make sure all that stuff's done the right way. And I commend him for that, because there are other toy companies that are like two years late, whatever. I'm not going to say the toy company on here, but yeah, they're, oh, here it is right here. It's a good thing I have these Action Force Redux comics to do my ads for me. So sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I'm I'm kind of curious. Paddy, how do you feel about the resurgence of all this stuff coming back?
I'm surprised. Well, not a little bit surprised. I don't think anybody, and even including the guys at Skeletron, were expecting the Roboskull Mark II to do as well as it did. That took Ben and Mark by surprise. Hence why they had to double the number of stretch goals a couple of days into the campaign.
They broke records on that Kickstarter. It's one of the highest Kickstarters that has ever been. So.
And they kept and they kept selling. The pre-order store did very well for them. I know they've been talking about getting wholesalers to distribute that toy now as well. So that's certainly a surprise. Like I said, I think anybody who knew that toy was coming, we kind of expected it would fund, and they would probably make a few figures as well. I don't think anybody expected it to finish where it did. So that was a surprise. So there does seem to have been a kind of hitherto unnoticed demand for it. And that sort of thing does get noticed. I mean, you can't sell $2 million worth of Roboskulls and not have somebody at Hasbro realize, oh, there's money to be made here. Yep. The Roboskull did nearly as well as the Sky Striker HasLab did. With less of a marketing budget and less of a 60 to 70 year history with the brand.
Yeah, exactly.
So that sort of thing, I think does get noticed. So hopefully it leads to some more official recognition over the next couple of years. I certainly wouldn't mind seeing a couple more classified figures referencing European Joes. Outback was a good start, but there's quite a lot more of that whole Tiger Force sub-team that were European exclusive to.
Well, not even the Tiger Force, but if you really look at what Classified has released already, you could get a Stalker Jammer figure, you could get a Gung-Ho Gaucho figure, you could easily get Quarrel Scarlet, you could get repaints of any of those characters as those versions, if Hasbro was willing to do it, I think.
Yeah. So I do hope to see a couple more things like that over the next year. It would be nice for Hasbro to go back and dip into that well again, because there's never been an official. License holders have done Action Force stuff. Outback really is the first official one that's been done. So it will be, official Hasbro one. So it'll be nice to see, a couple more added to the ranks over the next year or two.
So another interesting thing, back in the, I guess the 2000s, when Devil's Due was doing had the license for the G.I. Joe brand, they were really going outside the box on a lot of stuff as well. And that's where, when they lost the license, Rising Sun again, Hawks company, got to, I won't say fool around, I will say have fun with the G.I. Joe brand and the universe of the G.I. Joe and Hasbro universes, because they did the Red Dawn, Action Force Red Dawn series. That was 11 issues, and that kind of dovetailed into, if I can find it, the what is it? World War III Action Force series that kind of tied up pretty much every known Hasbro property that you can think of, and properties that weren't even owned by Hasbro, like Tomb Raider and RoboCop. What was the idea behind that, Hawk? Because it astonished me when I found out about the Millerverse, and you were explaining it to me at AR. I was just salivating as you kept going, every word.
So the Millerverse, and it's named after the primary person in charge, which was Jamar Miller. Jamar lives in Japan, and sometimes he has a place in Florida as well. But that's why it's named after Jamar. So it's called the Millerverse. And what it was we were all into the Devil's Due universe. You have to understand when that came out. Paddy, I'm not for certain for you guys if you were this way, but when it came out, we were hooked on it. Like we were following every drop. Like, I mean, I was in the comic shop every month on the dot when it came out. Like, we were hooked because we wanted G.I. Joe back. And, and was it kind of the same way for you, Paddy?
So Devil's Due didn't actually have a license to sell those comics anywhere but the United States.
Oh, okay.
They were never distributed here. So I believe the first Devil's Due miniseries was, and then Hasbro kind of said, we didn't give you the license to sell those in the UK and Ireland. And so they stopped immediately. This is at the same time Dreamwave was doing the Transformers comics, if you remember.
Yeah.
And that happened to Dreamwave as well, where Hasbro put the foot down and said, you're not allowed to sell those outside the United States. So we actually, the little bit of Devil's Due stuff I've read, which I believe is mainly the Transformers G.I. Joe crossovers, I picked up a trade paperback of those when I was in the States one time for my honeymoon, actually. But I've not read any other Devil's Due stuff because it was never allowed to be sold here.
Wow.
Okay. So that answers a big question for me that I didn't know, and I just finished a book covering the Devil's Due comic collection. So what happened is that in the Devil's Due universe, they actually approached the Red Shadows, and they do a version of the Red Shadows inside the Devil's Due.
Right.
And they're a little more like eco-terrorists in a way, what they're after in that version. And they come up with some really unique characters, and and I really like them myself. I like them. The other people that were in Rising Sun at the time did not really care for them as much, because they were very true to the original Paletoy run. And they do not reflect Baron Ironblood, the Black Major, a Red Laser. They don't reflect any of those characters. These were brand new. There was Arthur Kilk, there was Della Eden, and the main guy was Wilder Vaughn. And then they had a brand new soldier to go along with it. And in the Devil's Due run, they were vicious yet again. I mean, they brutally murder Della Eden murders Lady J, and it gets, and it's a permanent kill inside their universe. So there were several things like that going on. but what we felt is that, that's not, as much as I liked it, everyone else felt, no, that's not the way this needs to go. Eventually we decided to kind of rebrand it and say, hey, what if we were to take this concept and rework it so that Baron Ironblood is more prevalent in this story. So Red Dawn actually is focused on that idea about bringing back the original Red Shadows. Then whenever they got into World War III, the Devil's Due had got into World War III, we thought, oh no, this is way too short. Like, if it's World War III, it's going to be World War III. Like, I mean, it's not going to last 6 issues. This is like they kind of truncated this thing. And, so we began saying, okay, let's do a Hasbro kind of combined universe before a Hasbro combined universe ever came.
Right.
And we tied in like a true World War III. Every continent, we go to every continent. It's like 50 some odd books. So it's actually a real full-on battle throughout the entire world for World War III that eventually concludes, and of course, because we can't have endless war as much as us G.I. Joe and Action Force people would like. But so these were unofficial comics at the time. They're still unofficial, I guess, if you look at it that way, but they were unofficial at the time. And we felt like that, as much as we love Devil's Due, we felt like that they were not giving breadth enough to stories to tell them to their due diligence, and that they were missing opportunities. So we took it upon ourselves to recreate that or recarve the path so that it made for more integrated story throughout all of the brands. So long before IDW gets to it, we get to it first. And you'll notice that is a trend inside Rising Sun, that there is a lot of firsts that we get to before anyone else does. That doesn't make them better, but it just means we got there first. So take that as what you will.
So, Paddy, before we let you go, what do you see as the future for Action Force, whether it be in Europe, whether it be the United States, whether it be worldwide? What is your feeling on where this Paletoy brand that started over there in England is going?
As I said, I would hope Hasbro would do a couple of official things in the next few years with those figures. I don't know, like, we're never going to see a brand relaunch, although Hasbro UK still do own the trademarks here. They actually refreshed them only late last year. Something we noticed when we were researching the second book. So they do still own those trademarks here, and they've refreshed them recently. I'm not sure. I think, as I said, I think we will. I expect to see more stuff from Super 7 coming, and they know there's a resurgence of interest, and Hasbro are in the business of making money at the end of the day. So I think if they see that there's going to be some money in it, we might see some more come out over the next couple of years. Roboskull, Skeletron certainly intends doing more after Roboskull ships. I think the reaction they got to their first project shows that this was the start of something rather than the end of something, or a once-off. So I expect, Ben and Mark and the other guys will have their thinking caps on once those Roboskull ship as to what their next project will be. I expect it will be similarly drawing on an inspiration there. So yeah, I think we'll see, interest chugging along for the next couple of years at least. Although I don't expect there to be a massive brand relaunch of G.I. Joe Classified branded as Action Force in the UK anytime soon. Although that would be awesome. But like I said, I'd be very satisfied if we just got a couple more nods over the next couple of years.
I think that's very, very likely, and I think all that is all very, very true. I've enjoyed the brand thus far, and it's keeping me very invigorated because you know, as much as us American kids probably read our comics, I had to replace some of those comics because I read them so many times. They're deteriorated, so I had to replace them. And so now the new stuff is really giving me a lot of new imagination, and I'm very excited for it. And I read your first volume of your book several times. I want to read the second one again. I read it once, and it's just exciting to me, learning new things, bettering my knowledge of the brand and experience and stuff like that. And it has been a pleasure to have you on our show, and I appreciate you taking the time. And I know it's very late where you are, and I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, man, David, and thanks. Nice to talk to you, Hawk.
It was a pleasure talking to you too, Paddy.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care.
So that brings us to what Rising Sun is up to. I want to know more about Action Force that you guys are going to be doing, because you got the 2 Kickstarters that are coming out sometime this year. Do you have any other ideas? Action Force ideas? Maybe put some of the Millerverse into trade paperback. Poor Paddy there, he hasn't seen any Devils Do stuff, so maybe we can get some trades for him.
Well, I wanted to, there's several things that we already have. Obviously, we have Redux, we have Millerverse. There are trades. We've done some trades before for the Millerverse, and I'm certainly interested in maybe getting them reprinted. I think I would need to kind of like push down some of my stock first before it's possible. And certainly you can find that stuff at risingsuncomics.com. You can go on and order the copies. And some of them are original, some of them are second prints, and we'll try and get those filled as much as we can. But I think more importantly, for the U.S. people that may be watching this, how do you get your hands on these Action Force stories that took place before? And I think that that's really the key, is understanding what it is. Obviously, if you got Paddy and Lennon's book, then you've got like a base to go on. But Rising Sun also has the Paletoy Collector's Guide, which is done in tandem with Blood for the Baron, as is Redux. But if you want to start those stories from the beginning, you can actually get the Action Force completed works, which are on the Rising Sun website, and they start you off in read order from battle, when Action Force is put in, all the way until it transitions out into Marvel straight comics so you can actually get all of them. It's 10 volumes, and that is the best way. It's 10 volumes at 250 pages a piece. It's a lot of reading, so get ready. You're not going to get bored.
I wasn't sure when I was looking into this. Are they in the original black and whites, or did you guys recolor those?
So there's 2 projects that we had going on at the time. Originally, we were doing a recoloring, and the recoloring we got Rising Sun was doing this back like 95, 96, 97, 8. The recoloring project was going on. We got pretty far. I think we got about maybe 250 pages colored. So about 1/10 of what's out there. There's still a lot to go, or 1/8 of what's out there. But we decided to actually print these in their black and white version. So even originally when you would get a weekly, the front cover, the front splash would be color, and inside there would just be black and white pages. So in ours, it's all black and white. We didn't reprint any color in it. We did that mainly for a cost thing. I mean, we're talking 10 volumes at 250 pages. It's a tome. Like these are a tome to read. So, but it was the easiest way that we could say, hey, here's how you read it, all the way through, and you can find those on our store. So just go to our store and grab them up. Some of them are still on pre-order. We're hoping that comes off soon. As you know, all of our attention, if you guys did not know, all of our attention has been on Redux till we got that fulfilled. Now that we're nearly at the end of that, we're going to refocus and try and get some of our other projects that have been pending, finished up. So that's kind of the goal. Millerverse, I think that we actually went back and finished the Millerverse off. And a lot of people don't know this, that we did that. but there was actually another 15 books on the back side that were intended to come out in the Millerverse that never came out. And we actually went back and got with Jamar and had Jamar help us to help us as a co-writing set. And he told us where he wanted to go. So we've actually produced those books, and those books will be in the shop real soon. If you're part of our subscription service when it was running, then you're getting those books. They'll be coming out real soon. And that includes Scars and Shadows, 2, 3, and 4.
There's issue 1. Now I'm going to get the rest of it.
Yeah. So Scars and Shadows kind of is the other half. There's also Commandos and Marco. There's a bunch of other stories that tie into that inside the Millerverse. So that's a lot of Action Force content there alone. That you can find at Rising Sun. I hope that we can do more moving forward. There was a goal to take Redux and into a much larger series. But I think that we really need the support of our Joe community to make that happen. We want to make sure that, that it's beneficial to everyone, and that our numbers are correct as to who's wanting to pick it up and read. So that's a lot of things going forward. I think that myself, when it comes down to Hasbro, and I love Hasbro, Hasbro and I get along well. I don't know if they can fulfill the whole need that's within the community, if that makes sense. And I think that a lot of this is going to fall to our community to fill in some of these needs for some of this content, such as the Robo Skull, such as the books that Paddy put out, such as the books that we just put out, the after action reports, the command files, and all of this other stuff. I think that the community is needed to be able to fulfill those spots. And that's not been anything that's different happened in the past. Some of the old guard, they wrote books too concerning the 12-inch series that had come out to fulfill in the need that they had. So I think that this isn't out of the realm of norm. And I hope that our community says, yes, we'll embrace each other. We're going to help each other. We're going to make sure that we get there all together. And I think if that were the case, then I think we could have a lot more wonderful things coming out of the Action Force line, such as maybe some of those unreleased items that were going to come out from Paletoy during that time. Maybe some updated figures and characters. Before it was very challenging to produce figures, and it's much easier now than what it was then. Communication is a lot easier, and production runs you can get a lot smaller. So, we'll see. That's my opinion about that. What's going on in Rising Sun, and where I think where I want it to go. Where I'm optimistic that we can. I mean, there's already some people doing some wonderful prototypes, such as Mamba Men and hold on, the Red Shadows Officer that was supposed to come out in the next year of Paletoy. So those are really wonderful things to see.
I didn't know that they were doing the Red Shadows Officer as a custom coming out. That's interesting because like Paddy was saying, yeah, I really do think Super 7's going to really start doing some stuff. I think we're going to probably get the Jackal. We're going to probably get maybe Jammer, maybe Gaucho, because both of those figures have come out through Super 7 already. Scarlet has already come out, so maybe we'll get a Quarrel. Maybe some of that stuff. It just depends. I know definitely some Brazilian stuff has come out. There's a possibility they did. Let me see. Was it the Black Storm Shadow? I can't think of his name.
Ninja Coup.
Ninja Coup. They did the Red Ninja. I don't know what he's called.
Shaken.
See, there you go. And they did the teal Snake Eyes. He's like a weird teal color, light blue. That was from the Fun School Snake Eyes.
Oh, okay.
So they've done a lot of really interesting stuff that I had seen. Like I said, you see a lot of stuff at conventions, you see a lot of stuff on different boards and things like that, but you don't know that much about it. So I've seen all this stuff, but I've never actually had a toy of it. So now I do through Super 7. So if they start really that means Super 7, they may never end. Their Super 7 toy line could go on forever if they're going to start doing all these things. And the fact that they've already made like 6 Cobra Commanders, probably 6 Snake Eyes, and that's just a ballpark guess on those 2 versions, that they can just keep repainting figures over and over and over and over. And they are all 5 POA, like the original Action Force Red Shadow. Not quite as like urban looking as there's, I don't know if I can get a better picture.
Yeah.
It looks a little bit more urban, like realistic, like the details and stuff in the sculpt. And Super 7 is a little bit more in the animated style, because they even did an animated cell based on that, because it's closer to the animated cartoon from the 80s. So that's a lot of what they're going for with their stuff. But that's still okay. That's still okay. That's better than what we've had, and I think the community is big enough and it's growing, and the old people are interested in getting some of this stuff, or the Robo Skull Mark II wouldn't have been the highest Kickstarter at the time that it came out, for the fans and stuff. So I think it's a very exciting time for Action Force, and the Paletoy related stuff, and even international stuff. And that's one of the really fun things about Rising Sun. You guys incorporated, I showed the Brazilian G.I. Joe team in the ad, because Paddy was talking about it. But you really took the whole breadth and width of the G.I. Joe brand, not just Action Force, not just Brazil, not just American. You did all this stuff, all these versions. So it's like a all complete universe. Even though Devil's Due kind of diverged into its own continuity, you said, screw that. I'm going to take that continuity, Real American Hero continuity, Action Force continuity, and like you said, before IDW, you had the combined universe continuity, and you made your own continuity, which is awesome.
Yeah. And I think if, I think there's also like a quality, difference in the books too. The further you go along, you could tell that the earlier books, we were just really kind of figuring out what we were doing. And then as we get further along toward these end books, they're very pretty and very, almost different in its storytelling. But I like the fact that this resides in our world. I wish that more of our community would go, and more of you guys go pick it up, read it, tell us what you think. Tim, go grab these.
But I think the main reason why I only found out about it AR, and I'm full disclosure here. I was not aware of this. I knew of the Cobra series, but that was the only one. I didn't know anything about. I knew Action Force existed, but I didn't know someone was publishing new comics based on it. I didn't know that there was the Millerverse and all that cool new stuff that I know there'd be tons of comic fans that would want to get that stuff. So we've got to get it in those hands. And that means, guess what? You have to go to Joe Fest, Hawk. And so I hope you're going to be there.
We'll be at Joe Fest this year. We definitely will be. Ed has mentioned something at Schumacher. He's mentioned that they might be, that he's got to make some changes to Joe Fest after this. So I'm not for certain what's coming in. So hopefully it's not our last, because we're just getting started. But we'll bring all of our stock there. So if you're waiting for Joe Fest, that you can come there. If you need something to read in between there, here's a, you can find it on our website, and you can order it from us there. We do hope eventually to get PDFs out for purchase on our website for that is something that we really want to do. I think it just comes down to the workload of it, and that comes down to also the promotion. We've been very quiet about promoting, a lot of this stuff in the past because we've been too busy creating it. So, and now
You
that
have
it's
to have
created,
both, because if you create and create and create and create, but then nobody knows about it, why are you creating? For yourself? Maybe to a certain extent, but you've got to get the community involved, because that's how it grows. That's what happened with RoboSkull.
yeah, and we went to most of the Joe Fests, the last 5 years, representing Rising Sun, and sold quite a few books to people there, wondering what they were, being able to grab a hold of them. So there's always been this Rising Sun being involved in the community. And I think that that's where the real simpatico side of Rising Sun comes from, because now we're involved with the club, with James. You and I both are,
Yep.
are both involved with the club, and the club, I think, is a key element to keeping us all together and keeping us walking down this road. I hope that there's a chance that we can do some of this exclusive stuff through the club. I hope we see more of Action Force related materials there.
Well, the previous club, this is the third GI Joe club that we're involved with. The second GI Joe club, well, let me correct that.
Seven.
It's really the fourth or fifth club, if you want to really get down to brass tacks. The original GI Joe club in the 80s was technically split, because that was Americans' club, and then Action Force had their own club, and a lot of the things that were from the American just went right over to England, right over the pond, and they pretty much did the same stuff with a couple of differences in names and stuff and packaging. But there was two different clubs technically there, and then
let me intervene. So to be clear there, boys and girls, we're talking about officially licensed clubs. Go.
Officially licensed club by Hasbro and by Paletoy at the time, with Hasbro and Paletoy in conjunction. Then in the early 2000s, they brought the club back, and that was a mail-away club. That went for about 5 years, and they started a convention that was connected to that club. And there were some really interesting stuff. There was some Red Shadows figures in that club. Actually, I have a couple of them. And so that kind of was the new sculpt era of G.I. Joe. But then after that ended, they started the new club that was part of JoeCon, and that went till about 2017, and there was tons of Action Force stuff. There was 2 or 3 sets. There was a few figures that were released in the last 4 or 5 years of oddball characters like Gaucho, Jammer, Quarrel, you name it. I can't name all of them. I'm not an expert, but and now we have the new club that was launched 2022, James Kavanaugh and his team, me amongst, Hawk amongst, and a handful of others amongst, are now doing the new club. And that you should already have your first issue, second issue, maybe third issue by the time you watch this video. And they're doing some interesting stuff so we can talk about action, can tell people more about the toy line, more about the comics, more about the history and the brand itself from Paletoy and Action Force. So there's an opportunity for us to learn and broaden the fan base, if you will.
And for certain, I know that there is an article on the Colville experience that happened for the 40th in the UK. So there was a show that was put on by Bob Brecken, who was the designer over there, and we were involved kind of lightly, involved in the whole thing. So you'll see some of our art being used, in that show. And Jim Marshall was involved with it for a little bit. So we're actually doing an article on that's going to show up in the newsletter, and so yes, these two are they're part of the same world. This is the same universe in mind. and in my thinking, Action Man is actually part of that world as well. That it's not separated in any way; they're all connected.
Well, they did the figure. There was, I think it was a Tiger Force set of figures in the mid 2000s that included Action Man, O-ring figure. I have it. I don't have it here with me, but I have the figure. So he's considered part of the Hasbro universe, and you guys included him in the Millerverse too.
Yes, we did. Yeah, and I think that. I think that, and I want to be clear that this club that we're talking about now is not officially licensed yet. We're going to put a yet in there. We hope that we can rectify that and get a little further on with that. But I think that we can. I think that banding together inside the club, we can get a lot more of these things that we really want, more articles, more flavor on Action Force and all of that. And that allows, other people to do many other things. So let me ask you this, David, what would you like to see with Action Force moving forward?
It's pretty much what you and Paddy have said already. I want to continue to be able to explore these characters, explore this other corner of the greater Hasbro universe of toy brands. I want to see cool new merchandising like the Robo Skull, like Tiger Force, where the heck he is. He's down here somewhere. Tiger Force Outback, which I can't afford actual, wherever the can't even see him. My lighting is terrible. I apologize, folks. Tiger Force Outback. I can't afford an Action Force Tiger Force Outback O-ring figure, so I'm very happy to have that. I'm very happy. It's very cool. It's not the same thing, obviously. It's different. I just want the brand to keep growing and more awareness of the brand to grow. So that's what I would like to see.
Well, I think the Classified is definitely doing that. The Classified line is helping grow the brand. There's new people that wouldn't have came back for the Classified line that are picking up those figures, and I'm not for certain they're so there is that is becoming someone's GI Joe world, obviously. Yes. And I think that as long as they want to continue down that path, then we should be pretty okay. But I think we're in an interesting time for GI Joe. We've seen a lot of different things that have popped up and are very unique. I'd love to talk. At this point in this recording, we've just got the announcement that Atomic, or is it Atomic Comics?
No, it's Power Comics. They're doing Action Man.
That are doing Super Joe.
Super Joe, sorry.
Super Joe. And so that's really interesting to hear. It was a nice treat coming out of nowhere. Now, if you want some Super Joe before then, go pick up CTE. There's some Super Joe in there for you too. Yeah. So, So back to our Action Force related. This is an Action Force related topic here. I would love to see kind of a divergence with continuing down the Classified line, but I really want to see things. I want to see them do Action Force as kind of like a sub-branded item.
I think that's an excellent idea because, and sorry to interrupt you, but I had this thought earlier when Paddy was talking. I was like, I don't want to say that because it sounds stupid. But now that you just brought it up, I'm going to sound stupid. Marvel is doing the animated cartoon X-Men packagings, which it's a video cassette with different figures and stuff based on the design and colors and stuff of the animated series X-Men and stuff like that, and Spider-Man for that matter. So I think very possible, extremely possible, Hasbro can do a branded package of Action Force versions of the characters that they already have. Like I said, Gung Ho as Gaucho, Stalker as Jammer, Scarlet as Quarrel, Snake Eyes as Deleco, Cobra Deleco, and so on and so forth. Why couldn't we get a Cobra Commander? Red Shadows. They already have them all. Just color it differently. Do what Super 7's doing.
Well, I got to bring a little bit of contention here. There is a reason for that. Within the U.S., Bobby Valla, his Action Force, if you can hold that figure up, owns the brand license. And these are wonderful figures. Bobby Valla does a great job. He worked for Hasbro once before. In the Valorverse, he actually has a Sergeant Slaughter, and I think that's what you're showing there, right? Slaughter?
Sergeant Slaughter.
And you know,
but he did this whole wave. He's done like 4 waves, I think.
Yeah. They're beautiful figures. They're wonderful. Bobby does a great job. He
knows his stuff, and he does a good job. I'm not going to get political, but he's got to be careful how he communicates. That's the key with anything, any business.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that Bobby's going to continue on and continue putting out that, Action Force in the Valorverse. And I think it was very clever, his marketing and the way that he's approached it. And Bobby's been a sounding voice inside G.I. Joe for quite some time. He was on the brand all the way up. I wouldn't be surprised if he had worked on the classified line before he left.
I believe he was one of the people. I've got an interview with Daryl DePriest coming up on Monday, and I believe he was one of the few people. I think they ended up leaving 2015, 2016. I can't remember exactly, but he was one of that group that was pushing for 6-inch figures to G.I. Joe, and they laughed at them. They thought, nah, no one's going to want this. No one wants that. I think he was right, and Hasbro found that out.
Yeah, and now they seem to be doing okay with it. That doesn't mean that Hasbro is not without its own issues, or even Valorverse isn't without their issues. But regardless, they're a wonderful product, great stuff, and they both do a good job. So that's another way to get Action Force right here, right now. Right. And I think he did mention somewhere that they're actually working on some vehicles. I think he said that.
Yeah, last year at the panel, I think he was saying that they had some ideas that they wanted to do. It's just a matter of logistics, money, and support. Yeah. The whole thing. That's what it all comes down to, really. Support. If you don't have the support, it's going to be difficult to put your money into something that no one really wants. The Skeletron RoboSkull Mark II, they saw that support. It was there. There's no denying it. It's unequivocal. But, where we go with a lot of this stuff, a lot of these independent Kickstarters and how they're going to do a lot of this stuff, it's just support. Money is not endless. We have to earn that, and we have to put speak with our dollars and stuff like that. So that's tricky.
Yeah, correct. So where we're standing now is, I think that we can still support one another and be able to get where we're going. I do feel like there's a lot of newer people buying classified than it being kind of the same core group of people, the same.
Well, I know a lot of the old school guys are not buying classified, or they did initially, and they're selling off their stuff because it's just gotten too difficult to try and do all the stuff that's going on. But the younger guys that are into it, they're all in gung-ho and stuff like that. And I think that we do have to be very careful about how it progresses, because they can get confused. If I wasn't already fully vested and had some knowledge of Action Force when I learned more about it in 2010, I don't think I would have been able to absorb it. Maybe other people are better at that sort of stuff than I am, but I just had to get into it slowly and gradually. And now, I am a big proponent of Action Force and the brand of Paletoy and Action Force. So, You got
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that, moving into it slowly is always a good way. Taking it all on too much, it's a lot of stuff. So go slow.
Um, I think that pretty much covers everything for Action Force for the time being. I'm sure we're definitely going to be hearing more in the future. There's no doubt in my mind on that. Whether it be comics, whether it be toys, other merchandise, and I think there's a positive future for Action Force and Paletoy and its related ancillary groups and characters and stuff like that. So you think that's accurate, Hawk?
Absolutely, I think that's accurate. I think, I'm very positive in the fact that I believe we're on the upward tick of what's going to happen. We've had it show up in the official comic now multiple times. We've got Robo Skull Mark II, which holds 3 3/4 figures as 4-inch figures. It holds 6-inch figures. I think we're in the right spot. We're all in the right spot. Everyone's kind of firing on that cylinder, and Rising Sun included, with Redux and the complete works and everything we've got going on. So, I think it's a wonderful time, and I think we're going to continue to see that, rise up. Yeah.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself, Hawk. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or you would like to suggest topics for future episodes of the G.I. Joe Fan Club Live, do so below. I want to thank our tech support, Jason Packard, who has taken over as our tech support for helping us with these videos. Again, I would like to thank Paddy Lennon for staying up late with a cold, joining us on this episode. And thank you very much, Hawk, for joining me for this as well. I very much appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you a lot more in the future. I'm sure you're ready for it too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And all right. Now I think, just as a closing mark, go check out Rising Sun, risingsuncomics.com. Okay.
Yeah, that's where you can find cool Action Force comics. Go there, and a lot of other cool comics too. Thank you very much. We will talk to you next time.